What's up, War Room? Welcome back. Joe and Connor, fresh off recording our weekly pod. We recorded Monday night instead of Tuesday night with the short week. So, if you were listening to this Wednesday morning and any news has transpired beyond the Jets signing a random kicker, that is why we're not discussing it. What we're going to do with the current state of the season is we're going to use the pod to predominantly talk about the current season and the current matchups and whatever ridiculous quotes and news is filtering in and out of Florham Park because it's almost league season. And that's always a fun time. We're going to use the War Room to talk bigger picture, to talk offseason, to talk draft, to talk free agency, to talk all that good stuff, and to answer any other tangential football questions that we get. Maybe even mix in a little Knicks here or there, and Rangers. CR, how we doing? How we feeling?
Feeling good. I like hearing Knicks and Rangers. That brings up the spirits a little bit as we search for something to hold on to in these dire times.
I want to start with a straightforward draft question, and this will dovetail well off the work you've been doing on Stock Exchange. Then we'll get into a couple more of the fun ones. If you're a casual college football fan, like myself, like a lot of people in the Discord, who are a couple guys you would recommend keeping an eye on the last few weeks of the season, heading into the bowl games? Let's assume the Jets are going to pick right now that they'd be picking fourth. Let's assume they end up picking between 4th and 10th. Who are some guys to keep an eye on?
My favorite quarterback, the only one I'd really bet on in this class right now is Cam Ward, who's leading an undefeated Miami team. He's a super experienced guy. Started his college career at Incarnate Ward, then was at Washington State, now at Miami. He's started everywhere. He can run, change arm angles. He's a ton of fun to watch, insanely competitive. He's just kind of that guy. I'm higher on him, significantly higher on him than Shadur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck. If you're going to bet on a guy, he's the only one that I think is justifiably that first rounder that I'm saying this is going to be our franchise. So, and a lot can change, but he's been the most impressive to me. Let's say there's a world where Rodgers is back next year and the Jets are just trying to make the roster as strong as they can. They need a defensive tackle. Mason Graham on Michigan, I think, is the best one in the draft. He's somebody that is just super athletic, strong, can rush the passer, stop the run, take over games. You put a player like that next to Quinnen, and you have an interior that could be stout and run and play all three downs. I mean, then you kind of get into the mold of will this team really consider taking a corner that high? I think everybody knows.
Scaring Jet fans here, talking deep tackles and corners.
Unless it's Travis Hunter, who obviously is also a star wide receiver, and people really think he could play a little bit of both ways at the next level. I think that's going to be tough to do, but maybe he's got a package on offense and he's a full-time corner. It's crazy that the Jets could be picking in the top 10, and I'm talking about star college players right now, but that's really where we're at, and until it changes, that's the tier we're talking about. So, and of course they could always go back to the offensive line depending on how they view that unit's future. But I think those are the headliner names as long as this team is this bad.
Already seeing a lot of Cam Ward jersey swaps for the Jets, and I don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be that straightforward.
That's the one pick that I'd be like, just when I thought I was just out on this team ever figuring it out, I'm all the way back in because I just love the player that much.
All it takes is one quarterback, man. Talks about it in the pod. Look at Houston. Look at Washington. Couple ones from Andy that we'll bundle together. First one, looking at what's going on with Corley, and we both like Corley when he was drafted. I'm not going to act like we didn't. We actually predicted they would take him. What should the Jets have done instead, effectively? What was available there to do instead of make this pick? And I don't want to write off the pick. I don't want to. It's harsh to say this, but I've seen this before. I've seen the version of this player be drafted in this spot by the Jets with Jalen Saunders, with our Darius Stewart. He's kind of in that mold where those two guys didn't work. And then, of course, they've also had other mid-round misses with a different type of receiver with Chad Hansen and Shaq Evans and Stephen Hill. The list goes on. Elijah Moore is kind of his own bucket about why that didn't work.
Right.
Devin Smith also his own bucket why that didn't work. As you can tell, there's a long list of these guys. Denzel Mims. But Corley sort of has that Darius Stewart, Jalen Saunders. Jalen Marshall wasn't a draft pick, but he was kind of in the same mold. Let's assume this doesn't work, and I hope he does get a chance. What else would the Jets have done there? And then, of course, Andy also wants to know our favorite Halloween candy. You're going to be better served to answer the Corley question, and I riffed on it on the Discord Q&A last week a little bit. Halloween candy. I'm a big Reese's guy.
Me
I'll
too.
eat all different iterations of Reese's. I'll be eating tons of my kids' Halloween candy. I'll also be the asshole dad and uncle who has to dip at like 7:45 to drive home to
Yeah, but your
watch
kids
the
are young,
Jets.
so it's
They
okay.
get it. They're young. They get it, and they should
Yeah.
honestly be going to bed by like eight
That's
o'clock
what I
anyway.
mean. Like, it's an
I don't
easier
want
sell.
them
If they
up.
were like 10,
Yeah.
they'd be like, oh, no, hell no.
No, they need to go to bed by then anyway. They'll be overly wired. But what about the Corley thing? What was the move instead of this dude who's not playing at all this year?
Yeah, it's a shame they didn't have a plan for him because he's a fun player, and they don't have a plan for a player that you need to have unique ways of getting the ball in his hands. I did see that, he had some big blocks, but he didn't draft
Great blocker, the fourth
didn't
string
draft
tight
him to
end they
block.
drafted.
So say they wanted just a different wide receiver that plays more of a traditional wide receiver role. I mean, you could have looked at Jermaine Burton had a ton of talent coming out of Alabama. He also had a lot of character concerns. He had a pretty big preseason for the Bengals, and I think he had he caught a bomb this weekend, but I didn't think they really wanted to add that kind of personality into the room. It's weird. The run on wide receiver kind of hurt them, right? Because even after the first round where there was tons taken, all the way that Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Legette snuck in the first round, early in the second round, you had Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Jalen Polk. They all came off the board. Adonai Mitchell in the middle of that round. Like, the receivers were gone. That's just how it went. They were gone. So I guess what you could with hindsight, which of course is a dangerous thing to do, could you look at it and say they needed another body up front? I guess this wasn't a good class for that, though. That's the tough thing. I like the upcoming class's interior defensive line a little better, but I don't know if this was a class that I looked at it and said, man, like, you're going to go get like a beefy, hard-nosed player at the top of the third round. So it's one of those weird situations where I don't know how much hindsight you could really do with the pick. And this is a tough question to answer because it's not even November. And I think how quickly we forget players need time. I say that as somebody who I loved Cedric Tillman coming out of Tennessee. I had him as a top 5 wide receiver. I thought he was better than Quentin Johnston. And he did nothing his first training camp. He did nothing his rookie season. The very first time Jameis Winston comes in, because Deshaun Watson's awful, Tillman looks good. They traded Amari Cooper. Tillman looks good when he comes in last week. And then this week he goes off. He catches 2 touchdowns, wins the game against the Ravens.
Yep.
I mean, this is a guy who's in his second year. His quarterback's not dog shit anymore, and he's getting opportunity. But if you asked somebody 3 weeks ago, man, that Cedric Tillman take looks real bad. Like, he's not even an NFL player. But now he looks like a number 1, number 2 wide receiver. So we can't write off Corley. And it's hard to have hindsight with a lot of these guys because a lot of these guys around, I looked at the range. He was taken 65th overall. I looked at the range. A lot of these guys around him aren't even playing. And if they are playing, it's not a position the Jets need. Like, I like Cooper Beebe, the guard center that went to Dallas, but the Jets Tippmann's fine. Simpson and ABT before he got hurt are fine. Like, that's not the Jets' issue right now. So, and it wasn't really a good defensive line class. So it's I know this is going to shock people, but it's not even a big hindsight situation. I think what's disappointing to me is that they didn't have a plan for this guy, and they still don't have a way to get him involved.
I mean, look, I do wonder.
And he was Rodgers' pick.
Yeah, let's see if Lazard's active or not in this game.
I don't think he will be.
I mean, if he's going to play, get him a couple targets. Try something. Let him return kicks. I mean, I get Gibson was a little better, although still like scary as hell on punt returns, but let him return kicks, manufacture a couple things. Maybe you find something. We'll talk about this more post-bye week in particular, but you need to get a long look at Olu, a long look at Corley. You probably want to give Davis a couple looks here or there, see if there's any juice there at all. I mean, there's not much more to do beyond that. Maybe a little JBC and Stiggers, depending on like what happens in the secondary down the stretch. But I kind of actually like how some of the depth guys. I really like Isaiah Oliver. That was like a sneaky, like okay free agent signing. Yeah. Jalen Mills is like their best safety off the street, which is depressing, but also like he's better than Ashton Davis and he's better than Bubble Wrap Adams. So I hope they kind of stick with him. Conversation for a different day. Underdog fantasy. It is that time of the year. NBA, NHL, MLB still going on, NFL. We are making our higher and lower picks every single week. We got best ball drafts going. Still time to use promo code Badlands to get a deposit match up to $1,000. CR, how are we feeling with some of these Knicks higher and lowers? How are we feeling about the start of the season?
Feeling good. You got to be optimistic right now, right? The Jets didn't give us much, so we're on to the Rangers in hockey. We're on to the Knicks in NBA. And, man, following the pick'ems it's a nice way to keep yourself busy while you're in between checking all of our 20,000 best ball lineups we drafted all year.
Amen. Yes, a lot going at once right now. Follow along with Underdog. Follow along with promo code Badlands. The best place to play. This one from Mikey T. Inspired by the watching of The Godfather after yesterday's latest kick in the balls, I have a silly yet important question for the pod if you could. Choose any of the 6 hits during the baptism scene. Yes, I'm including Carlo as an analogy for the season. What would it be and why? Oh, man, what a great question. This is why we do War Room. This is why we have the Discord. What a great thing to also watch Godfather at 4 o'clock on a Sunday directly after watching the Jets-Patriots game.
It's so great.
Now, we're coming up to
Godfather.
Yeah, it's a great palate cleanser. And we're coming up to Godfather season for me because I watch it always around Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's always on it used to always be on Turner Classic Movies. Now you can just kind of watch it wherever. But it's something me and my dad and cousins, uncles always put on in the background, and you always catch something you forgot the last 41 times you watched it. I will say this is like, you know what I'll say? I will actually say it's like Carlo because they lull him into that false sense of comfort, which the Jets did at 2-1 after beating the crap out of New England. You get in the car, you take a deep breath. Hello, Carlo. Bang. Season's over. 5-game losing streak. Here we are 40 days later. And we're talking about the Jets hiring John Gruden potentially and what quarterback they're going to draft next. So I'm going with Carlo.
Carlo's a good one. It's a good one. Part of me has a little bit of the vibes of it's Clemenza going up the 12 flights of steps.
Out of breath.
I think, with the gun in the box.